Hello everybody and welcome to another personal games video. I played a game last night in the London League for Drunken Knight's second team against Kevin White, who is ECF 185 and has been around that grade for quite a while, so he's a fairly seasoned player. The time control was 75 minutes in 30 moves, with a 15-minute add-on to finish the game on the night. And unfortunately, I had to travel halfway across London to play this game, and I was about 10 minutes late for the match, so not a good start. But when I got there, I found out I was white, and so I played c4, knight f6, g3, e5. Then I did my usual move after g3, which is bishop g2. And this brings us to the topic of the game, really. Black played a rather unusual move, which is known as a waiting move. In this kind of position, unless Black plays g6 and bishop g7, he is debating where to put the f8 bishop, c5 or b4. If he plays bishop b4, he wants to play it after I've played knight c3, so that he can threaten to double my pawns. If he plays bishop b4 now, I can play a3, kick the bishop away, and then have time to play b4 and bishop b2, which is very useful. So what Black does here is Black passes and lets me make my move to see what I'm going to do. He plays h6, and I'll talk more about this kind of move a bit later, but the idea for now is to get me to play knight c3 so that bishop b4 is more pleasant for him. And I played against this once before, and I, for some reason, was scared of playing knight c3, and I had a horrible game, which ended with me losing everything. So from that, I just thought, what's wrong with knight c3? So I played it. Then he played bishop b4, the point of the last move. And here I'm not afraid of him doubling my pawns. I played knight f3. And I feel that if he has used that waiting move, he should really take my knight, because that's the point of bishop b4. He doesn't play that move, though. But let's have a look at bishop takes c3. The computer gives b takes c3 as being correct, because generally you're meant to capture towards the center. But the move I would probably have done is d takes c3. So I feel that if Black ever pushes d5, or b5, I can take with my c4 pawn and repair my pawn structure. And also my queen and dark squared bishop are now able to move out more, and they have more squares under their control. So I felt that the slight weakness in pawn structure in taking away from the center was worth the semi-open d-file. And the game could continue d6, castles, and after Black castles, we're going to have an interesting game here, where I'm going to have the two bishops, and Black is going to have a better pawn structure. What I could also do later is push c5 and try and trade off my bad c-pawn. So we'd have an interesting game here. But going back, instead he played knight c6, and the trouble here is that at this point in the game, this is the four knights version of the English, and usually white is a move behind here because Black hasn't played the move h6, which in my mind, is not such a good move, which I'll explain later. I castle, which would not normally be available to me in this position. My knight would be on g1, so I'd have to play knight f3 first. But here I can castle. Black castles. And we've come out of this opening with white effectively being a tempo up. So I want to talk more about waiting moves. I think of them as moves that allow you to continue with your plan. So, for example, earlier, black probably shouldn't have played bishop e7 because then moving bishop back to b4 would waste a move because you'd have moved the bishop twice. But the move h6 did allow black to castle. It didn't interfere with any plans. d6 would not have been a good waiting move for that purpose because it blocks the diagonal so that the bishop on f8 couldn't come to b4. But the reason I have a rather controversial opinion on waiting moves, I do them myself, they're not all bad, but in the opening I feel that a waiting move should be one that improves your position and usually is something that either develops a piece or sometimes is a pawn move which allows you maybe to develop your bishop, like b6, d6, e6, g6. And also, if it's a pawn move, I think if you're doing a waiting move with a pawn, it has to be a move which you would have played anyway. It has to be one that fits into almost any plan. So a move like d6 would have been such a move, but in this case, it stops black doing what he wanted. But the thing with waiting moves is I consider them to be moves that keep your position fairly fluid. It allows you to change your plans and is fairly non-committal. So a waiting move is never one that is a move which sets about lots and lots of tactics or sacrifices, etc. And with most pawn moves, I don't consider them waiting moves, really, because a waiting move is fairly non-committal, but a pawn move is one of the most committal moves you can do on the chessboard because you can't undo that move. You have made the decision to push a pawn, and the pawn can't move back. So when you make a pawn move, you have weakened several squares behind it or to the side of it. So the move h6 weakens the g6 square, and also it stops black really ever fianchettoing. I know here it's unlikely that the bishop would go to g7 from b4, but it has removed that option. And doing that kind of thing just to see what your opponent will play, especially in the opening, seems rather naive to me. I would have considered, so for example here, if black played the move rook e8, that would be a good waiting move. It allows the rook to move out. You might be wanting to see what white does in the centre. And if the very worst happened, you could always move the rook back to f8, so it's not committal. But h6 is now going to be there forever. And the thing is that h6 doesn't need to be played. It's not a move which fits in with black's plan. I am almost certainly not going to move my bishop to g5, even if I could do that. So I consider the move h6 not to be a good move because it doesn't help control the center. It doesn't help with development. One of the main reasons to push your h-pawn one square forward is to prevent a bishop moving to g4 or g5, and that's not on my radar as white. And also this move is not really a waiting move either because it's a pawn move. So here I was very, very happy, and I'd also caught up on time about this point. So I remembered my opening book on the English, which said knight d5 was a good move. So it's trying to take the bishop on b4 and gain the bishop pair. Now, if black takes, then I can take with the pawn, and then black's knight on c6 will need to move, and I will win the e5 pawn. So there's a few options here. One is retreating with the bishop to c5, but then I have a nice tactical shot, which gives me a space advantage. I have the move knight takes e5. Then if black takes, I have d4, and I'm winning back the piece for the pawn. And also I'll have opened up the centre a bit as well, which usually helps white, especially as black's bishop on c8 is not able to move and development is a bit more clunky. The computer gives the best move as being knight takes d5, pawn takes d5, bishop d6, pawn takes knight, bishop takes, and again here, white has two centre pawns as opposed to black's one centre pawn. It's a very small thing, but it does help control the centre. Perhaps queen c2 might be the best move, and then rook. The rooks could either go on c1 and d1, or d1 and e1. I also have moves such as e4, bishop e3, and then pushing all my pawns on the king side with f4. So I feel that my position is very, very pleasant here, and black still is behind in development. So d6 would almost certainly be played. And then we'll have a game, but I think that white is better due to the space advantage. So if we go back, he did not play bishop c6, bishop c5 in this position. Instead, e4 was played. So I don't really want to go in for tactics with knight takes b4, pawn takes knight, etc. So I didn't really even look at it, and I don't think it favours white anyway. So what I had planned was moving my knight on f3. That still keeps the idea of me winning the bishop pair, and also attacks the e4 pawn with the bishop. So I didn't want to play knight h4 because I don't have many squares to move to. My knight's mobility is seriously cut down, and then black may have ideas of trapping my knight. I play knight e1, and I'm aiming to bring it around with knight c2, and it will then return to action. Here I was thinking that black would now play bishop c5, and I would be quite pleased with that move because knight takes f6 wins the e4 pawn. So he plays rook e8, which keeps the e4 pawn. I then take the bishop, so I've won the bishop pair. And here I was debating what to do, and I think I didn't make the right choice. In my opinion, I think I should have, in retrospect, I think I should have played knight c2, offering the exchange of pieces, because that would allow the pieces to be more free. And when there are fewer minor pieces on the board, it's generally easier to open up the position because there are fewer tactics lurking. And the more the position is opened, the better my bishops will be compared to his bishop and knight, partly because of my bishops being very well coordinated, and also the fact that a bishop and knight are very hard to coordinate. So my minor pieces will be better than black's pieces, both practically and in theory as well. But instead I gained space with a3, knight c6, and then b4. So this is the classic queenside space grab that white does in the English. I'm planning to play bishop b2, and then knight c2, and perhaps knight e3 or d4. And I was looking at a5 for black, but I thought that I could play b5 and attack the knight again if that happened. The move that he played though was d5 to allow the c8 bishop to move and gain a bit of space. So here I want to exchange pawns and get rid of the pawns in the centre, because again, the more the position is opened, the better my bishops will be. So c takes d5, queen takes, bishop b2, a double fianchetto, and I now thought that my position looked very good. And I thought maybe bishop f5 was the best move for black, just to develop and to perhaps play rook a d8. So black isn't really that far behind in development. It could be argued that I'm actually behind in development here because black has the queen and rook, which are more active than my queen and rook. So here, after knight e5, I'm trying to prove my advantage. And the way I'm going to do that is by swapping off more centre pawns and going into an endgame. So the computer move is not the one I played. Rook c1 is the computer move, attacking the c7 pawn. c6. And then, well, again, we'll have an interesting game, but I'm a little bit better. The move I played was d3, using the pin on the long diagonal. If pawn takes d3, I can take the queen with my bishop. So here, it also prevents black's move knight c4, which could be useful in gaining back the bishop pair, which is my long-term advantage. And bishop f5 was played. It's a very interesting move. So here, black is doing very well in development, and I feel it all leads back to that so-called waiting move, h6. If black had the extra move, so if we put the pawn back on h7 and give black another move, I think he'd be doing extremely well. Maybe rook a d8 is best, or maybe just moving the queen off the pin, so queen d7. So it does. The waiting move has long-term implications because if you do it in the opening, doing a move like h6, you're not developing or helping your plan of controlling the center or whatever it is you're doing, and it has long-term implications. So we've reached this point where I have enough time to play fairly actively. So after bishop f5, I play, again, rook c1 is the computer move, queen d6, takes, queen takes, rook takes, knight takes, and it gives me a very small advantage as white. Again, it's the two bishops which are giving me the advantage, and I think I agree. I think I do have a very small advantage, but it probably is very, very level. I'm just going to keep on and on playing and playing and trying to grind down my opponent with the permanent long-term advantage of the superior minor pieces. So that was one line, d takes e4 if I play rook c1 and queen d6. But what I do instead is knight c2. So I'm aiming to play knight to e3 and fork queen and bishop. And then it will be two knights against two bishops. And as long as the center is fairly open and black doesn't have any tactical moves, I'm going to have a very big long-term advantage because the two bishops against two knights with an open center and pawns on both sides of the board is a huge plus for the bishops because they're long-range pieces and can influence both sides of the board, whereas the knights are fairly short range pieces and so can only influence one area of the board at any one time. So that's my plan. And I felt that he missed a very useful move here, Queen b3, which I only saw after knight c2. And I eventually decided to give up the two bishops advantage because of black's activity, and then to swap off. And I still felt that here I had a small advantage, but again, hardly anything. Now I'm the one who has a very slight lead in development and therefore more active pieces. And then here I could play perhaps knight b3 to c5. So it is fairly level. Again, there's not a lot in it for white, but I thought maybe my bishop is slightly better than black's bishop because it's aiming at the long diagonal where lots of black's pieces are positioned. And maybe I could improve the knight a bit, and my rooks are better than black's rooks. However, black has a long-term advantage in having a queenside majority against a kingside majority, which I always give preference to a queenside majority if the kings are both on the king side. So that was definitely a possibility for black. Queen b3, which I think the computer also gives as a very good move. Instead, though, he played the move Queen e6, and after the game, he didn't feel this was a good move. He thought Queen d7 was better because of my next move, Knight d4. So again, forking the queen and bishop. Queen to d7, knight takes bishop, queen takes bishop. And again, I need to open up the center, so I play d takes e4, and black actually takes the pawn with the knight. So another practical example of the two bishops overpowering the two knights is when there are other pieces, heavy pieces on the board, the queen and rooks, usually bishops and the heavy pieces can work really well together in creating tactics. So there's a move here which threatens about 16,000 things all at once. I might have slightly exaggerated the number. Well, the move is Queen d4. And here I'm threatening the knight on e4 with two pieces. The bishop also is vaguely eyeing the b7 pawn and the a8 rook. Also, the knight on e5 is being put under a bit of pressure, and the queen and bishop are lined up against g7 as well. So, okay, I'm threatening about 1, 2, 3, about 5 different things. And here, black has several moves, but none of them are very good. The computer briefly gave rook a d8 as being its best pick, and I can play bishop takes knight, queen g4, queen c3, queen takes e4, and then I have a killer blow with f4, where black's knight is now pinned because if it moves, I have queen g7 mate. Black has to give up the knight, and then this should be an easy win for me. I'm a piece up for a pawn. So as long as I don't make a horrible mistake, I should win. So going back to the position, rook a d8 is pretty much out the window. Knight f6 is the move I was looking at because it stops any queen takes g7 mate ideas. But it does give up the b7 pawn, so I've won a pawn out of this. Rook a d8. And I just don't think that black's better pieces compensate for the lost pawns. As long as I'm careful, let's say rook d2, I can Probably exchange my way out of this. Bishop takes knight, queen takes, bishop f3. Black could try doing a crazy move like g5. And then I can just catch up in, I say development, just catch up in activity, really. Get my pieces nice and active. And here, if rook takes e2, I have rook takes c7, so rook e7, e3. And yeah, as long as I'm careful, I should win with my passed a pawn, if nothing else. So that's what happens if knight f6. But in the game, he played neither of those moves. He played knight d6, protecting b7, and also protecting his knight, or moving away the attack knight. But there's a problem. I have f4. And again, it's just as deadly. Again, the knight cannot move because queen takes g7 mate. So he played the move that doesn't lose the knight, which is knight b5. And that does stop my queen and bishop teaming up and threatening mate. But my queen can move to a very good square. Queen c5. And now I'm still pinning the knight on e5 because I could then take his queen if it moved. And he doesn't really like this option, so he plays b6. And this could lead to a very interesting opening, interesting position. After f takes e5, then queen takes f1, rook takes f1, pawn takes c5, bishop takes rook, rook takes back, and then pawn takes pawn. And I am a pawn up with... Oh, wait, actually, I've just seen something over the board. Okay, wow, I should have maybe played this. It would have been a lot easier. No, I haven't seen something over the board. No, my imagination. The move I was looking at was a4, threatening to win the knight, but he'd have knight d4. So b takes c5, threatens a4, so he'd have to play c6. And then even though I've got moves like rook d1, which will give me a good advantage, I still think there's quite a lot of work to do here. So this was not the line I played in the end. I played a much more accurate move. So yeah, here I've got a good advantage, but perhaps black can create complications and draw. Or at least it will take me a very long time to break down the defences. So I did not take the knight. Instead, I thought that the move b6 allows me to play bishop takes rook. So the rook is under attack, and the knight on e5 is under attack. And he can't defend both. So I move the queen back to c1, and black has the unpleasant option of allowing me to take the rook or allowing me to win the piece on e5. He chose to play knight g4. I then immediately take on a8. Then we reach an interesting position. I've won the rook. Black could win it back, so rook takes a8. I'd looked at queen c6, rook d8, and then rook a d1. I just want to swap everything off now, being the exchange up. Rook takes rook, rook takes, perhaps knight d6, and then queen takes c7. This looks very good for white. Again, as long as I'm careful, as long as I don't allow any sort of checkmating ideas like queen e3, which was there. So, keep my eye out for any checkmates or cheapos, but I should win. The move played in the game, though, was not rook takes bishop. It was actually rook takes e2. And there is an unpleasant threat of perhaps having the queen and rook team up. And then there are amazing ideas around here. Well, I play a safe move. I don't want to uh, be risky. I'm already a rook ahead. So bishop f3. And he plays one last cheapo. Queen d3. So we're at move 24 here. And I did want to go home early, so I didn't look at very complicated lines like Queen d1, where he could exchange and then take my bishop on b2. I just wanted to play it fairly safe, and I looked out for checks, which I meant to do. Look out for forcing moves and captures. I couldn't see anything, so I played bishop takes g4. And here he resigned. There's no checks, no nothing. But if I'd have played bishop takes e2, which I felt looked dangerous, it turns out black's actually winning. Because queen takes e2, and how am I preventing queen takes h2 mate? I have to play rook f3, and he could take it, but what's even better is queen takes h2, king f1, queen h1 check, king e2, queen g2 check, and now I lose the rook. And black can take the time to grab a couple of pawns. And we will reach a position like this, where he's the exchange down, but he has 3 pawns for the exchange. And my king is also very airy, so I think at the least it would be drawn. Black would be able to find a perpetual there, if not outright win the game. So the thing which you may have seen if you've watched a lot of my personal games is that when I'm winning like this, I don't want to go in for crazy tactics. I only do that when I want to attack and win. If I'm just trying to see out the win, I will play safe moves, play very solidly, and prevent any counterplay. So after queen d3, I saw bishop takes e2, queen takes, and the queen and knight are teaming up very well. So why not just remove the knight? And the queen and rook can't really work together because my bishop, rook, and queen are attacking all the squares. They're controlling all the squares around my king. So a move like queen e4 would be maybe the one move black could play to threaten mate, but then I could play bishop takes rook. And if the rook moved to c2, I could play queen d1 to then exchange off. So, yeah, I mean, this position is completely won. But if we go back again to the starting position, which was the waiting move controversy, I thought that here h6, again, I do not consider it a waiting move. If you want to play bishop b4 and do it after I played knight c3, why not just play the move knight c6? It's a move which you could say it's a waiting move. You're waiting to see where I put my knight. You're developing a piece as well, so you're doing something useful. As you saw from the game, knight c6 was played anyway. It fits into black's plan, and it's not the most committal move because the knight pretty much always goes to c6. If you want to put it somewhere else, you can maneuver the knight around later on. But you can't do that with a pawn. You can't maneuver it back to the square it's gone to. So if I play knight c3, then mission accomplished. He's done the waiting move successfully and has brought the bishop to b4, and that will lead to a line in the English. And then here, if I don't want to play knight c3, if I instead play a3 and then b4, bishop b2, the move knight c6 fits in with black's plan, whereas h6 does not. So again, I have very strong words for that h6 move, because even though black accomplishes his goal, I could even play knight d5, and then we would reach a similar position where black is still a move behind because h6 hasn't really accomplished anything. So if you do want to play waiting moves, I suggest moving pieces, and I suggest making a useful move which allows you to be fluid with your plan. The move could be used in several plans, and also it should be also something where you could retreat and reorganize your forces. So generally not a pawn move. Anyway, that's my rant on waiting moves involving pawns. So I hope you enjoyed that. And comment, like, subscribe. I will see you in the next video. Bye.